half almost of owner-operators, then Facebook's a great way to do that.
That's right. So now that we've talked a little bit about sort of scope and applicability, let's talk now about why it's useful as a marketing channel.
Okay, so Facebook fundamentally is very similar to every other advertising buy that you've ever made for recruiting, except that this is a highly engaged audience. Banner ads work great, search works great, print ads work great, but it's a little bit of a different channel. This is where people are actively going to find information. It's very engaged. And it's also a primary point of content consumption. You're paying attention, your eyes are open a little bit wider when you're there seeing what your friends are up to, pictures of grandkids, pictures of your friend's vacation. All of that information is there, so it's a huge point of content consumption. And those two facts lead to really high conversion rates. They have some of the highest conversion rates of any advertising platform. And I know, Nick, you've seen that running campaigns for our recruiting clients, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think Facebook is now one of our best cost per conversion mechanisms that we have in the arsenal now. It's been something that has really come on for us as going from, a lot of people get Facebook as a content distribution channel and for content marketing, but for us it's become very directly lead gen. In fact, Facebook has been converting better for us than paid search, so it's something that really a lot of people don't think of Facebook in that way from a direct response standpoint, but we've definitely seen that certainly in the last year.
Yeah. Well, and then before we get into some of the nitty-gritty details of how you can use Facebook, I just want to do a quick review of some best practices. Depending on the size of your fleet or how scaled up your recruiting efforts are, you may not have gotten into some of these yet, so I want to establish a baseline. First, you need to make sure you're using a business page. And so you have a personal account and then you have a business page. A lot of people go with the personal accounts because they can ask people to become their friends, and the content is a little bit more visible. There are multiple problems with that. One, you will end up getting shut down if you ever actually grow. Facebook does not want businesses using personal accounts. You also lose access to all of your analytics, your page like demographics, and you can't do any of the advertising platforms. So it may seem like a short-term solution, but in the long term it's going to hurt you. The next one is to carefully consider access and managers. This isn't something that you get your friend's nephew that just graduated from high school to do. This is a large audience that is creating messaging about your brand. So if someone is sick, if someone is out, you need to carefully consider who has access and make sure that you have managers that you trust. The other is post multiple times a day. People log in at different times of day. And I know, Nick, for you, you were saying that posting at different times of day, you hit actually different audiences.
Yeah, that's right. We saw as we started to change up and post at different times throughout the day, not only did we get more people clicking through and get sort of a more quantity, but it was of traffic, but we actually got different people. We got a whole different set of people who tended to click in the morning, a different group that tended to click, at lunchtime, and a different group that tended to click through in the evening. So I think people's personal consumption habits lends towards, if you're posting more often throughout the day, you're going to wind up attracting different segments of your audience.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Facebook's own reporting and in our personal experience, posts that use images and videos get a lot more engagement. It's a very visual format. If you're just scrolling through with your thumb on your phone or on your desktop, it's the images and videos that catch your eye. And the last thing I would say is respond to comments. And this goes back a little bit to what we were talking about, the fear of social media. You can jump in. And there was a quick story where I was talking to a fleet about social media, and in the middle of the session, someone commented that this fleet hated veterans and they hated everyone because they had hung the flag improperly. So what do we do? What do we do? So they very respectfully jumped in and said, we're so sorry if that happened. Here's the guide that we were using for how we hang the flag. We love that. And it was almost beautiful to see all of the drivers for that fleet jump in and say, yes, they do love veterans. They hire a lot of them. I've driven for them for years, and they're fantastic. So opening up that conversation led to a lot better exposure than if no one had commented at all. So you need to be prepared to respond to comments.
That's great. And as we go now to talk more about on the advertising side, I just think it's important to tie together that in both of the channels we're going to talk about today, Facebook and YouTube, I think it's important that you're active on the channel, not just from an advertising standpoint. So that's why, to me, this is so relevant to tie into the advertising discussion, is that it's really important to see if people are exploring and they wind up looking at your brand on Facebook, that they're seeing that type of activity as opposed to just being present from an ad standpoint. So that's, to me, how this mixes together. But as we go on now, let's talk a little bit about what, for people who maybe haven't seen it or didn't know what they were seeing when they saw them, what the ad formats look like and what's available to Facebook.
Okay, thank you, Nick. That's an excellent point about how your organic presence definitely ties in with your advertising presence. So the main ad format on Facebook is the newsfeed ad. And when this first came out, there's a bit of bickering from users, but now it feels very normal. It shows up there right in your feed. You do the big image, and you can actually optimize those for likes. In our experience, if you're running a straight ad to get people to like your page, you don't get as many likes as if you're just running content that is like optimized. So here you can see you still have the option to like the page, but you're showing them what type of information they're going to get if they do like the page. And then you also have the banner ads on the side, that sidebar section, and those work really well in companion with the newsfeed ads. And those also work well if you're just trying to drive people to a very specific landing page. Those work well when they are retargeted. If you're just trying to introduce something, you probably should go with the newsfeed ad because you're going to get a lot more visibility.
That's great. Let's get into how can I target these ads. So now that I've seen these, and I kind of have a vision for what it would look like if it was my fleet who had an ad there on the page in Facebook to my users, how do I target the right users?
Okay, let's talk about that. So the first way that you can target on Facebook is through demographics, and this is information that people put into their profile. So if you put your birthday, now we've got age. If you put your gender, now we can target on male versus female, and then break those groups down even further. So I can help you not target people that aren't old enough to have a CDL. The next way that you can target on Facebook are through topics of interest, and this goes back to other pages that you've liked. So if I like, using the example in the previous screenshot, if I like Samsung, then you can target people who like Samsung. And this applies to anybody with a business page. Then you've got behavior. What are they clicking on? What is catching their eye? What are they liking? What are they sharing? What are they commenting on? And that can help you target not just who sees your ad, but what your ad contains. Then we've got connections. So these are friends of friends. And I'm sure you've seen this if you're on Facebook. I feed a lot where Nick Reed likes this, and then it shows up in my news feed. What pages do you like on Facebook, Nick?
You know I got Dr. Pepper locked. You know that much about me.
Right. So Nick Reed likes Dr. Pepper, and Dr. Pepper is showing me this great new ad just because they're showing it to people that are connected to Nick Reed. And now these last two, they're some of my favorite ways to target on Facebook, and it's been very effective. So first we've got email address and phone number. And if you're logging into Facebook, you'll notice that for a long time it's been asking you to put in your phone number and put in additional email addresses. That allows us, it's not tied back to a personal account. Once it's imported, you can't see anything. But everyone in that list that matches to Facebook sees your ad in their news feeds. You can get really targeted with that. For instance, for this webinar, when we were driving registrations, I know a number of you saw this, the advertising on Facebook. We were using this method, and it was very successful and very exciting for us to be able to use. And Nick, that stat that we talked about before, of 65% of our driver email addresses matched on Facebook, can you give a little bit of a backstory on what that means for recruiters?
It means that we have an enormous audience to the tune of 300,000 to 400,000 drivers that we're able to target just on the basis of, email targeting on Facebook. And to go back, a lot of times people get a little nervous when you talk about this, but when you upload those emails and phone numbers, it doesn't necessarily tell you the individuals who match, which is what Julie was saying. It just tells you of this big group that you uploaded, say 60 or 65% of them matched. And then it becomes an audience that you can run ad messaging to. So it's not something where it's super creepy and I can run a message that's straight to somebody individually. It complies with all of the behavioral advertising guidelines around privacy, but it does open this up as a channel that can get really targeted, because all of us, whether it's us as a media company or you guys who are listening as fleets, we all have large email lists that we can use to get pretty targeted to the type of people we want to message to. So this is a really powerful way to get focus. And I would say of everything we've talked about, so far, the behavior and the email addresses are probably the two that we make use of the most at Randall Riley anyway, to be able to target drivers for recruiting purposes on Facebook.
Right. And to your point, Nick, of everyone here has their large email list. If you don't have a large email list, or it's just tired and you need to hit a new audience, you can use Randall Riley's list as well to target on Facebook, which really gives you a great audience expansion.
That's right. That's right. And the fact that, again, our strategy as a media company is that we're sending content on a daily basis to hundreds of thousands of company drivers and owner-operators, trying to keep them engaged, trying to make sure that when we do help fleets be able to extend their audience reach to people via those email addresses and phone numbers, that's a really active, highly targeted group. So that's a big part of our strategy here, and what we're trying to do with content to get people engaged and then use slices of that audience through email and phone targeting to get down to the exact right segment for our clients.
Exactly. And that brings me to the last way that you can target your advertising on Facebook. So all of these are just determining who sees those newsfeed ads or sidebar banners. And so this is custom and lookalike audiences. So custom audiences are audiences that have visited certain web pages. And this is where it gets really cool. You can use web pages that have specific words in the URLs. You can create these custom groups of people that have visited websites. So if you're running a special promotion and people looked at it but didn't convert, you can remind them of that on Facebook. Even if you don't have any of their specific information, like their email address or phone number, or if they haven't liked your page. So this is a great way for targeted re-engagement. And the other point that I would add there is you can also use third-party audiences, like Randall Riley audiences. If you're trying to reach owner-operators, you could use people that have visited overdriveonline.com. And then let's say you've maxed that out and you just want as much exposure as possible. Through Facebook, you can say, people that look like this custom audience I've built, I want to show it to them too. And that can drastically expand your reach. So if you're trying to get big-time exposure for recruiting drivers that is still targeted, custom and lookalike audiences are a fantastic way to go.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
Our experience, too, is that the lookalike, act-alike technology that Facebook has is really, really good. It's as good, if not better, than Google's, I would say, in terms of the groups. When you build a group and you build lookalikes off of it, they tend to be a really good match, and their conversion rates hold up right there with the original group you started with the match.
Yes, we've seen the same thing as well. So let's talk about some examples. The obvious example, and this is where I'm going to have Doug jump in, because he was the one that actually ran these campaigns. typical VP of marketing. I take the credit and make everybody else do the work. So we took very specific audiences by email and also by pages visited to drive people to this webinar. Doug, which audiences did we end up using for this?
Well, across all of our Facebook advertising, we probably targeted 10 or 15 audiences. The most success that we've had were conversion-based campaigns that targeted our own cookie list from RandallRiley.com, and then also our newsletter subscribers, and then also all of our, our broader email list of people who are, contact email addresses that we have that are associated with our recruiting content. When we basically combined all of those together, and we also matched by, in addition to our cookie lists, we also matched by email address and phone number. And when we combined all of those together, as well as a couple of lookalike audiences, we ended up with a really, really highly targeted audience. And chances are there's at least a few people in here who found us through the Facebook ad, or one of them.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting for us to watch that work. Nick, what are some examples that you have seen on your side?
Sure. Just 3 quick client examples. The first was a recruiting client who has traditionally been known as a company driver-based fleet, and so they wanted to sort of announce themselves as having a great owner-operator program. They had it independently reviewed, and so they were going with a little bit of a content and storytelling approach, trying to change perception of themselves, into being somebody that an owner-operator would want to go to work for. And so they were using primarily the news feed ads that we looked at, and they were telling their story. They were targeting owner-operators, but they were trying to sort of challenge perception and reposition themselves, and the content that they linked to talked about their independent review that said they had one of the top, their new owner-operator program in terms of pay and the sort of features of it were one of the best in the industry. And so they were using a more of a sort of brand-changing, but still trying to get some leads type method, and that's what they were using the news feed ads for. Of course, the most common example is that we have a dozen or 2 clients who are running ads in that right-hand rail, and they're using it for just direct response. We had one client who had traditionally been running paid search, and they were hiring mostly experienced drivers, and they were using search to do that. And when they moved and started doing some stuff with us on Facebook, they found that their cost per conversion actually dropped by 20% just running those right-hand rail ads, very similar to what they were used to for things like search or display. And I think that's a good place for a lot of fleets to start, because it's more comfortable in that it's not quite as involved as the news feed ads, because there's not the option to share or like. Now, again, in the example of the content, that you actually wanted that. But if you're really just trying to ease your way in, the right rail is a great place to start with ads that are very similar to the sort of traditional pay-per-click type model. And then the third is just sort of a hybrid approach where people are trying to do a little bit of both, where they've got, I would say that's probably the majority of campaigns, where they're running both ad formats and have multiple campaigns going. So we have several customers that have, hey, I've got sort of a national ad that's running, to this broad segment, but then maybe I have a Teams-only message that has specific messaging for newsfeed and right rail.
That's great. So let's keep moving so we still have time for YouTube. On Facebook, there are a couple of key takeaways to kind of summarize this. Your target audience is on Facebook. Drivers are on Facebook. You just have to find them. We talked about a lot of different ways that you can find them using targeting options. And then the next is use the type of ad that will get you the when you need. So if you need to tell your story, like Nick was saying, if you want direct conversions, you can choose that right-hand side, or you can use the news feed, or a combination of both. And then the last one is target only those users most likely to engage with your brand. No one has an unlimited recruiting budget, so you don't want to be throwing money away in front of people that aren't going to engage, that aren't willing to convert. And that's where you can layer those targeting options to build a really uniquely targeted audience on Facebook. So now Nick is going to move forward with us talking about YouTube. So Nick, I told everyone how big Facebook is and says it's the biggest. What about YouTube? Is it a space worth playing in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the scale is once again massive. YouTube is the second most searched website on the web behind only Google itself. And similar to some of the numbers that you shared, the monthly users, over 1 billion monthly users, 6 billion hours of content used monthly, 100 hours of video being uploaded per minute. So it's massive in scale. And then, of course, within that, the same thing is true for that was true for Facebook, is that our audience of company drivers and owner-operators are highly engaged there. 50% of company drivers and some 35% of owner-operators are active on YouTube. It's something where we see, even for our own advertising that we do, hundreds of millions of impressions each month.
That's pretty exciting. And I think one of the things that's unique about YouTube is you don't have to have a logged-in account to be a user. Everybody looks at YouTube videos. So it really expands your audience. It's not somebody can share a video ad with someone who doesn't have, or someone can share a video with someone that doesn't have a YouTube account, which allows for a lot more word-of-mouth spread of your video content. So, Nick, our audience is there. Why does YouTube work? You mentioned it was really effective.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is, of course, that their model that they've set up to make it more attractive is that you only pay when people actually view your video ad. So that means that as a channel, it's extremely cost effective. I think a lot of people are surprised. They expect YouTube to be more expensive, but our experience is that we see in our space cost per views that are in the $2, $3, $4 a view range. So I think people are accustomed to paying that or more for a banner click or a PPC click. So when they say, hey, I can actually get a targeted audience to watch a video telling my story, they're very surprised to see, that those costs are as effective as they are. And of course, the fact that, just as we'll talk about in a minute, there's so many ways to make sure that you're only reaching a relevant audience. The fact that they give so many targeting options and retargeting options means that you can get hyper-focused to delivering your story to exactly the right audience. And then from a sort of platform and channel strategy, 25% of all YouTube videos happening on mobile means that this is, when you're thinking about your mobile strategy, this is a really great channel to consider because of how much activity there is on mobile there. I think our numbers are a little closer than, the 25% of all YouTube views is a global number. In our market, we're seeing it get much closer to 50-50. So it's really a great opportunity to do something that's highly relevant on mobile. And then lastly, you see the number just in this one segment, we've seen over 70 million video impressions for our client videos in the last month.
That's a lot of video impressions. That's pretty exciting. All right, so you talked about video impressions and retargeting your audience. What does the audience actually see? Oh, I skipped ahead, sorry.
Well, it's okay.
You want to run through some best practices and then we'll jump into the ad?
Yeah, that's fine. These lead into each other. So from a best practice standpoint, this goes back as well to what we talked about with Facebook, is that when your ads are running, they of course tie back to the brand that you're representing and to your fleet. And so you want, if people actually click through or they search for you, that they find that you're active on the channel. It's not just advertising. So making sure that you have an active account. Of course, if you want to run your own video ads, which I think is a worthwhile thing for any fleet to do to their own, like say people who visit their own recruiting pages, you need to tie an active AdWords account to your active YouTube account. So I would recommend that people have both of those set up. Making sure that your videos are 30 seconds and certainly no more than a minute. I think it's probably more of a temptation to our marketer and OEM clients. A lot of people want to put big product videos or a big like corporate overview video. These need to be very targeted to what you're trying to do. This is a 30-second message where you're trying to grab somebody's attention, especially in the first 5 seconds, and then hold them through, you know, a 30-second spot. And then keep your message to the point, be authentic. That just goes back to the time frame. You want something quick, to the point, grab people's attention, and get right into your message. And then, of course, you get the opportunity to have ads that run alongside your video, both from a display standpoint and in the related videos section that's to the right. And so as we sort of give you a vision of what this looks like, a lot of people have seen these and get these. So the ads that run before you're going to watch a video where 5 seconds goes by and then you get the opportunity to skip, those are the ads we're talking about. So in this case, you know, the item number 1, the in-stream video ad, that could be your ad going specifically to a highly targeted set. So let's say you had a specific video message for team drivers. That could be running as pre-roll, retargeted to Rand O'Reilly's group of team drivers, for instance. And you could have a specific message where you try to grab their attention and make sure they see it's relevant to them in the first 5 seconds. And then they're given the opportunity after that to skip. And again, because you only pay for the people who don't skip and the people who actually view, that's where you get a ton of impressions. You get an opportunity to really have a very cost-effective ad running in this format. And then number 2 is just showing you what it looks like over on the right in the related video section when your video is promoted for people to click on to view.
Okay, and you mentioned quite a few times that there are different targeting options. Can we run through those real quick to give people an understanding of why these are so effective and targeted?
Sure. So we're going to start with the ones that we use the most. So number 1, of course, tagged audiences. I referred just a second ago. This is something where you can drop a tag on your own website, or you can use tagged audiences from vendors like Rand O'Reilly, who have very specific niche tagged audiences that you can use to run your video to. So in my example, you know, team drivers is a fairly small set. You can use a tagged audience from somebody like Rand O'Reilly to run a very specific video message to that, or to people who've been to a specific section of your own website. The thing we use probably right behind that the most is geo-targeting. When in a recruiting context, this follows your hiring area. This follows an area of need, or you know, something where a lot of times people have a national message. They have their dedicated accounts, and then they have top 10 hardest to hire areas. So this is something where we'll have campaigns that are set up in a similar way. We'll geo-target their whole hiring area, then we'll zero in on some dedicated lanes, and then we'll have a handful of geo-targeted, give me, you know, 75-mile radius of this city, because that's one of my harder to hire areas. So I want to make sure I'm letting people know that I'm in their area and that I'm hiring specifically there. Anything you can do in display or search is available from a geo-targeting standpoint here. We've even done this with our own database of truck stops, where we're geo-fencing truck stops and showing video pre-roll ads to people who are at a truck stop. Demographics, just like we talked about with Facebook, you can do stuff with age and gender being the most sort of popular options that people use to be able to narrow the scope of their ads. Interest, this is something that Google offers where they have some predefined interest categories. This is something you can experiment with. We haven't used this as much in recruiting, but they offer sort of, if you're in their advertising interface, they offer pre-selected interest categories and subcategories to help you narrow people to the type of content that you're looking at. The one area where we did talk about using this was people who had an interest in, say, military and armed forces websites. So that way it was a way if they were part of the, let's say they'd been to my website, and I had them tagged and they also expressed interest in you know, military or armed forces websites, then I would run a veteran specific message to that interest group. This is just one example of how you could use that. Another one is pages subscribed to. So this is something, again, where if you wanted to specifically target people who subscribe to Pride and Polish's YouTube page, or to some of the the customizers and Chrome Shop people, because you maybe had some sort of trade show message where you had a tricked out truck or something like that. It's just another mechanism to be able to find people who are relevant. You might find people who subscribe to Overdrive's page or something like that. And then the last thing that I would say that is really unique about targeting on YouTube is that I mentioned before, you only pay for the people who actually view your ad. The other really cool thing that YouTube does is that they automatically drop a remarketing tag on the people who view your video. So now you've got some built-in lead nurturing sort of put into this process where, hey, I run an ad to, let's say, a company driver segment that's geo-targeted. Then out of that I get, say, 500 people who view the video. Well, then I can turn around and do another retargeted message, whether it's in search, display, or video, to those same people, but just the people who viewed. So now I'm sort of narrowing my way down the funnel towards conversion.
So I'm in Birmingham, Alabama, and someone sees my video ad that is most likely a company driver in that area, and then I can show them search results because they watched my video?
You basically, it can layer as a filter on top of search. That's right, through, we call it audience PPC, but inside Google's platform, that tag is also good for basically any other type of remarketing.
Okay, those are some pretty impressive targeting options. Would you mind talking a little bit about some examples of what you've seen our recruiting clients use?
Sure. So I think one of the really great things about YouTube in general and video in general is that it's a great mechanism for storytelling. So this is a way for, especially if you have a, I'm thinking of a specific fleet who changed a lot of their model. They went from being a very long-haul oriented fleet towards a lot of local and regional work, and so they were trying to tell drivers about, in those specific regional areas, about their new story and their new strategy. So that's certainly one way to use it. I think it's also a great mechanism where we had a client who was trying to do a lot of things to make, from a retention and a showing how they're doing things for their drivers to make their life better on the road, where they had a video that was talking about the fact that they were putting in these satellite TV units into their cabs and doing some things like that, and they were actually telling it their story through video, and that was going to be something that they were going to be able to use from a pre-roll standpoint to tell that story to people besides the people that subscribe to their page. So now it was getting a broader audience, telling them something about that fleet. So it's really good for telling stories and things like that. It's less of a direct response channel than what you talked about on Facebook, I would say. So if it's all about, hey, I need more short forms and that's my win, it might not be as effective for that. But if you're making a strategic pivot, if you're making a bet on, hey, I'm going to put this technology in the cabs of my trucks, or I've changed pay, or I'm changing perception, I think it's a great way, a very cost-effective way to tell that story.
That's pretty cool. And we did use YouTube advertising for driving people to this webinar. It's an easy example because that's why you guys are here. And Doug, we got quite a few click-throughs and registrations directly from those. Is that right?
Yeah, our YouTube ads performed really, really well. I ended up wishing that we'd had them up longer. We ended up getting a really good number of registrations off of both of our ads. We were using mostly remarketing and then also some interest-based targeting as well. Just a heads up, guys, we've only got about 20 minutes, and we have a ton of really good questions. So as soon as we can get to the question and answer, I think everybody will be excited to get to that part.
All right, I'm just going to let Nick wrap up YouTube with your key takeaways, and then we'll jump into questions.
Perfect.
Yep. So as we talked about, only pay on the view basis, and usually those for the same price as a banner click. You're getting somebody from a targeted segment to watch a video message about you. You can target drivers using custom audiences, and it's a great thing to do as part of your mobile strategy because compared to I would argue compared to a, let's say a banner click inside of a mobile game app, that this is a way better way to go from a mobile standpoint in terms of value. The other thing I would say is that if you talk to YouTube and to us, the main thing that keeps people from trying it is video assets. They actually don't have the pre-roll to run. And I know there's a lot of vendors, and we're one of them, who, if people give a 3-month commitment to running a YouTube campaign with us, we actually help them shoot the video for free. So I think that's a way to try to help people, again, keep those costs down so that they can get a video spot created, it's theirs to take and use, and they can run the campaign, and it's cost effective.
That's a really good point. Creating that video content is kind of the biggest hurdle to get over sometimes. So that's with 3 months, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Nick. Let's, Doug, what questions do people have for us?
Boy, we have a lot of questions in here, and a lot of them are really good. One of them was from Tim, who asked, short of hiring a video crew to produce professional content on YouTube, what do you recommend for producing good content? Nick, you talked about a lot of vendors, us included, people who will, if you commit to run some ads on YouTube, will just take care of the production for you. Why don't we talk about just a couple of other quick ways that you can create really good content without completely breaking the bank?
Sure. So I know one thing that we do. So I was just going to say, we experimented with some contractors. So in addition to our own video people, we've tested a few contractors to find people who could help us go on location to do that. There are a lot of agencies who do a great job with that and have really good teams to do it, and it's pretty cost effective. And one of the things that some people are doing, and that Google's even building a tool for to try to make it more cost effective, is a system where you can basically take an audio message and put sort of slides or animation in front of it, so it's not necessarily like on-location shot video, and make a video, a 30-second spot with a voiceover basically over some slide transitions or over some animation to make it less expensive to build than, say, sending somebody on location to film.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
You can use animated things. PowerPoint actually can export as a video if you want to go in and add your animations. And even with that, you can, for very cheap, you can get professional voiceover and music for that.
Yes,
right.
yes.
It's
not,
what are some? Go ahead.
It's not as expensive as you would think. We've had some good success doing that on our end as well. Let's see. Oh, here's a really good question from Frank about SEO. If you were considering these partially, and he's talking about YouTube versus Facebook, partially as SEO builders, would YouTube outweigh Facebook since Google owns YouTube and loves themselves? Love the way you phrased that, Frank.
I'll answer from.
You go ahead.
Real quick. I know that content sharing and content usage is very important for SEO. And with Facebook being a little bit more of a content-heavy platform, if you're driving extra traffic through Facebook to a blog post, that would be a big advantage. But as far as Google loving themselves and that helping with YouTube, Nick would have to answer that one.
There's no denying that. I would give pretty much the same answer you did, Julie, though, is that Facebook, and especially because you can use a lot of times the things you post on Facebook also on Twitter, I think that probably tips the scale in favor of Facebook because, as Julie said, Google uses the sharing aspect of Facebook and Twitter as sort of a proxy for what they used to only use people linking to you for. So I would say if it was just from an SEO standpoint, it might tip the scale a little bit towards Facebook, but there's also been experiments that show people who had active subscriber channels that the link from their subscriber page carried a lot of SEO juice also. I think it would come down to which content I thought could get shared better. How about that?
Because it's all about engagement at the end of the day.
That's right.
Indeed.
Yep.
Okay. This is a question from Kara. What if the goal isn't to get Facebook likes, but instead it is to take drivers to a specific website landing page? Is promoted post on Facebook still better than a sidebar ad?
I think I would say that you at least want to shift towards doing more sidebar ads. We've had some mixed experience with that where running newsfeed with the right-hand rail ads work just as good from a cost per lead. I'm sending them to a landing page type standpoint. And I think we have a lot of campaigns like that. But there's no question that for us the conversion rate going to a landing page from those right-hand rail positions has been really tremendous over the last 6 months to a year. So I think the right-hand rail probably wins that just a little bit. Plus, it's obviously quicker and easier to create ads for that. So if I was going to be forced to choose, I would run ads on the right rail.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
And I would throw out the additional branding exposure of being in the news feed and in the right-hand rail. If you don't have to choose, I would do a mix of both, but maybe lean more towards the right-hand rail if you're looking for direct conversions.
I think that's right.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's go with one last question here. We are just about ready to wrap it up. Ben was looking for some information about the types of videos that owner-operators are searching for on YouTube. So I think what he's essentially asking is, how do I target owner-operators on YouTube?
I can jump in real quick on this. In our recent connectivity reports, which is where we got a lot of this information from. So if you go to randallriley.com, there's a ton of research about what type of content they use. But drivers do search for equipment information and fleet information. So if you have some kind of great feature in your trucks or some sort of great program, you can get that up. If it's more lifestyle type stuff, they're probably going to be more actively searching for that, and that's where you would target your ads for them. I don't have exact data, but I wouldn't expect a driver to go into YouTube to search for who's hiring.
Yeah, that's right. If you're thinking of it more from a content creation standpoint, I do know that anything to do with trucks, and especially we even joke internally on Overdrive that a lot of the stuff we do with our custom rigs is like owner-operator clickbait. It's always one of the most clicked things that we do. So one way that fleets use that is there are a lot of fleets who have participate in things like Pride and Polish. So if they sponsor one of their own owner-operators or one of their own company trucks even to be in Pride and Polish, then they can then pretty cost-effectively have somebody who's already on location at the Pride and Polish event shoot some video of the truck and of the driver who entered it, or the owner-operator who entered it, rather. And that's a quick way that, hey, I used a Pride and Polish sponsorship to give me some content that, in our experience, is the most popular with owner-operators.
That sounds great. You know what? We have one more question from Twitter that I had missed before that I did not want to skip over. And it's an interesting question. It goes back to the kind of organic engagement side of things from the beginning. So, Julie, this question will probably be easiest for you to answer. If you post multiple times a day, don't you run the risk of coming off as spammy?
All right, so that's an interesting point, and I've had this debate with many people. The thing is, as you post that information, not everyone is going to see it. So the way the Facebook algorithm works is you post something as your page, and just a small percentage of people, 5 to 10% of people that like your page will see that. And if they click on it, if they like it, if they engage with it, then Facebook says this is worth putting in people's newsfeed and starts to show it everywhere. So I wouldn't worry too much about coming across as spammy, because there's so much information in the newsfeed that it's going to get really spread out. If someone has 2 friends on Facebook and they like your page, then yes, they probably will see all of your 3 posts that you made that day. But in general, you're just going to hit different audiences and hit them with content that resonates differently. And I would also throw out, when you're looking for that sort of organic engagement, we've seen a big boost in our organic engagement after running sponsored posts. You get more exposure. Facebook starts to see the engagement that happens. Maybe they were testing it with the wrong parts of your audience, the wrong 5%. So those two do play together really well.
I would say I think you're exactly right, Julie. The only risk is if what you're posting is less relevant because you're posting more often a day, then you might wind up you're not going to be spammy for all the reasons Julie said, but you do hurt yourself because if your content's not good, then that click-through rate of people engaging with it is going to be low, and you're going to be less likely to show up in people's news streams. Well,
and that's an excellent point. I mean, Facebook and YouTube are in some ways forms of content marketing, and the first rule of content marketing is give people something they want to see. And if it's not something they want to see, then eventually they'll stop seeing it in their newsfeed anyway.
Yep. This is very true. And again, just to reiterate, it's not about how often you post, it's about what you post. That's what, I mean, I have pages that I follow that I see 15 times a day, like Mashable. I follow them. I see almost everything they post, but I don't care because I like their content. I don't have a problem with seeing it. It's a win-win. Well, I think this is about time to wrap it up. Julie or Nick, do you guys either have anything that you wanted to add?
I'd like to throw in that I really appreciate everyone for attending this webinar and listening to it. I hope it was helpful. Please provide feedback either via email or Twitter or Facebook on ways that we could do this better. We're always open to improving. And in this, we've talked a lot about very broad ideas for Facebook and YouTube and kind of the conceptual levels of targeting and where your audience is. Doug's going to put a link in the chat, but you can ask us to set up a one-on-one consultation where we can go through what your social media is, what your targeting options would be, what your specific audience is, and where they are on Facebook and YouTube. So I would encourage you to do that. And again, thank you. And Nick, is there anything that you would want to add?
No, that sums it up. I want to thank everybody for listening, and definitely share feedback.
All right. Well, thanks for attending, everybody. This was great. You've got the link in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in the answers to the questions part of the forum as well. And then you're also going to be getting an email from Julie in just a few minutes with the subject line, Next Steps on Facebook and YouTube. Go ahead and open up that email, click on that. We would love to have a great conversation with you about